Hi, I'm Victor Lammer. I'm a professor of cognitive neuroscience at the Department of Psychology, and I'm also what is called the track ambassador of this master track, the track Brain and Cognition in Society. So I will tell you a few things about the content of the track, and then after that you will hear some technical details about how to apply and stuff like that from Manon Slockers. So let's get this show on the road. So yeah, telling you what the master is about, what we will teach you, what the program is, and how to apply, when to apply, and who can apply. All right. So the basic tenet of the master is that, of course, if you think about it for a second, the science of brain and mind, so psychology and neuroscience, can be applied to, well, sort of every situation where human or even animal behavior is involved. So, or it has to be changed, or it has to be better understood. So, whether it's about climate change, marketing, why people eat too much, why people protest, why there's social unrest, why they drink too much, or racism, all these kinds of issues that are, of course, important for societal developments, and to some extent also important for business, have this component of human behavior. And yeah, the surprising thing is that in trying to solve these problems, we'll tend to listen to economists or lawyers or politicians, tech company CEOs, sometimes even actors and artists or religious leaders. But we are convinced that, this is at its core a problem that psychologists and neuroscientists should tackle. So that's why we invented, you could say, this master, to let the world understand that, psychology and neuroscience can help a great deal in solving these kinds of problems and issues. So what am I talking about? Well, I already mentioned a few, but you can no doubt come up with countless other examples yourself. For example, why are people afraid of vaccination? Why are people so emotional about nuclear energy? While in fact, and that's what you see there with the arrow, it's the safest form of energy that exists, and of course also the greenest, but we don't feel right about it. Why are politicians often, or maybe I should say always, able to manipulate our choices, manipulate voting behavior, even with the most stupid and simple promises, like illustrated here, up to the point that you may ask yourself, is democracy even tenable, given how easily people are manipulated? Of course, we had these quasi scandals showing how people got manipulated into voting either this or that by means of what they saw on Facebook, and of course you have this whole social media thing where people start to engage in these bubbles and never come out of their rock solid opinions anymore. Climate crisis, already mentioned that. How can we get population support for these kinds of measures, which are, of course, not all that popular? I mean, having to burn less fossil fuels, having to eat less meat, stuff like that, which people, in general, don't like. How can you convince them, and how can you change the behavior for the better in those kinds of situations? And of course, we have recently, it's still going on, I guess. We had this other issue with of course, the coronavirus. That's all about behavior and how some policies succeeded, some other policies failed, and why did they fail, and why did some succeed? Often I have the idea that particularly government doesn't really understand human behavior all that well, and it would be nice if they understand a bit better how people's brains work if they want to apply and all these kinds of policies. But also, a bit closer to home, you could say, we eat too much and we eat unhealthy. And you can say that to people until the end of days, but still they will eat unhealthy. And obesity is a really big problem in our society, up to the point that it's now almost becoming fashionable to become obese. Is that the right behavior? I don't think so, but it's another example. How can we change these kinds of behaviors? Or how can we get people to exercise more, which is of course also important. Sitting down is the leading cause of death after smoking, I think. And there are ways of doing that. One example would, for example, be gamification, where you have people getting points for the distances they run and stuff like that. But the underlying mechanisms of gamification are, of course, very interesting, because it shows you how you can change people's behavior by, of course, appealing to rewards, to dopamine systems and stuff like that. Other examples, traffic. I don't know whether you've ever encountered a situation like this. Who invents these kinds of signs? I still don't know what this means. But so, yeah, if you know a little bit about how perception works and a little bit about how attention works, you wouldn't design traffic signs like this. Sometimes you really wonder what they are thinking. And of course, more medical situations, behavior is also relevant. Stress, the effects of stress on the brain. You see in this slide, it's quite a few effects that stress can have on the brain, and how can you alleviate those, and how can you prevent stress having effects on the brain, or how can you prevent stress at all? Another thing which I find particularly interesting is the psychology and neuroscience of marketing. Marketing, of course, is the ultimate example of how you can manipulate behavior of, in this case, consumers, to let them buy stuff that they would otherwise maybe not buy. What's really happening there is that they're really pushing the right buttons in everybody's brain so that they will buy, well, the kind of products that you can see here. But I would say marketing is the ultimate example of applying psychology and neuroscience in the wild, in the field, because you really influence what people are doing, buying, choosing. So those are just a few examples, and there are countless others, of course. And the idea of this master is to get you into this world of human behavior in the wild, human behavior in society, human behavior in the market, and apply knowledge of psychology and neuroscience to these kinds of issues. And so how can you have people better behave? How can you, using psychology and neuroscience, how can you get people, well, buy stuff using psychology and neuroscience? So that's more the marketing side of this master. How to apply knowledge that you already have, because we assume you know your psychology and neuroscience, and you have a bachelor with a psychology and neuroscience background, if all is well. And the idea is not so much that we teach you new psychology and neuroscience, but that we teach you to apply the knowledge that you already have of neuroscience and psychology to these kinds of societal and business issues. And how can you do that? Well, there's very many ways of doing that, of course. You can write stuff. It's really important to realize that writing for the general public, or for consumers, or for people whose behavior you want to change, is very, very different from academic writing. So you need a few skills there to do popular business writing, and we'll teach you those, for example, by teaching you how to write a column, or how to write opinion pieces, commentaries, blogs, also vlogs. One of the things is also making a video. That's I would say a fairly radical change from maybe how you've been taught to write up to now in your bachelor, because it's really different. If you want to change people's minds, academic writing usually is not the way to go. And of course you can do that in newspapers, blogs, columns, and short pieces like that. But of course you can also write books. Actually, writing books is a very, well, sometimes even profitable entertainment. But there really are very many books on how you can apply neuroscience or psychology, for example, as illustrated here, to the workplace, to how can you get people more productive, how can you get people to be more happy, how can you get people to feel less stressed, etc., etc. And of course, to some extent, this is not all that scientific, not with all that good scientific backgrounds, solid scientific background, I would say. So, of course, there are many of these self-help books, and this is a huge industry, actually, all the psychology to improve yourself. Some of it makes sense, some of it really don't. So that's another thing we want to teach you to, of course, you have to, if, for example, if you do popular writing, you have to write in a very different style, but keep to the science. That's another important issue, of course. You can also do consultancy. What you have here is Dan Ariely. He's a psychology professor who does a lot of consultancy for business. He also has a few businesses himself, wrote a lot of books, by the way, also writes columns, so he does the whole thing, you could say. But he's one of the, I think very good examples of how to apply psychology and neuroscience to all sorts of issues, societal issues, business issues, even starting businesses himself, for example, an insurance company. Then there is the sort of other side of this medal, which is that, of course, you can also use the techniques that are used in psychology and neuroscience to solve particular issues. A good example, and this is what we call neurotechnology. A good example would be neurofeedback. What you do in neurofeedback is, of course, that you record brain signals, for example, by very simple portable EEG devices, and then you train people to change their own brain waves so that they become more relaxed, so that they feel less depressed, and there are all sorts of applications already exist using these kinds of technical methods, which are, of course, coming from the field of neuroscience and psychology, like EEG recording. Sometimes this is taken to you could say, next level. Of course, Elon Musk has started this company he called Neuralink. His idea is that we should connect the human brain to artificial intelligence using sophisticated electrode systems, because otherwise, we will fall behind the intelligence of AI, and we will be superseded by AI. So we have to keep up with AI. That's his mission statement, you could say. We don't want to lose out from AI, and I think the recent developments, like this whole issue with ChatGPT, is already indicating that indeed AI is going very rapidly, and maybe we should do something about it, or we should implant ourselves or augment ourselves using AI. This is a somewhat weird example of neurotechnology. This is a startup that's pitching the idea that when you die, they save your brain, they vitrify it, so they turn it into a sort of a glass-like substance, which allegedly saves all the connections of your brain, of your nerve cells. And of course, the sort of central idea of how brains work is that everything that makes you the person who you are sits in the connections of all these neurons, and if you can then somehow reconstruct that in a computer system or so, then maybe you will relive as an AI system, something like that. That's the idea. But just to illustrate how far you can get with these neurotechnological developments, of course. Another example of applying neurotechnology to a business case in this situation is what's called neuromarketing. A bit more realistic, probably. Where neuroscience measurements are used to optimize or fine-tune marketing, advertising, TV commercials, banners, internet stuff, things you see in the street, and any kind of marketing. The basic idea there is that when you ask people what they think of marketing, of TV commercials, of anything, of products, they will often give answers to the questions in things like focus groups and surveys and questionnaires. But the problem is that these have very low predictive value for the actual success, effectiveness of the marketing or even the product itself. And the idea of neuromarketing is that if you record brain responses, to some extent unconscious responses, to these kinds of marketing materials, you can better predict whether they are successful, effective, or not. And this is the basis of neuromarketing technology, and I'm also one of the co-founders of a neuromarketing company called Neuroscience. And then, yes, if you would extend that even further, of course, there's all sorts of other applied research that you could do for companies, not so much about marketing, but maybe about how they do their businesses, how they make products, how their development cycles work, how their management works. You can think of countless examples where you do sort of similar things, where they have a research question, where the company has a research question they want to get answered, and where you apply psychological or neuroscience research techniques to answer these kinds of questions. And then finally, it's even possible, and you have a few examples here, to use psychology and neuroscience to entertain people. Neuromagic is an example. It's magic, but it's to some extent it's also using psychology and neuroscience to trick people into believing things that maybe are different than they think they are. Or you can teach people about, as you see in the poster by Henk-Jan Honig, Erik Schedder, and Dick Swaap, teach people about the brain, which is a very popular topic, and you can even apparently even have a theater show about how the brain works, how musicality works, how, typical topics of these guys. All right. So, to reiterate, what we will teach you is to apply knowledge from psychology and neuroscience to all these kinds of societal and business issues. That's basically it. Either by conducting and designing research that's relevant in the societal or business context, or to translate research into practical advice. And most important thing to keep in mind is that this master is not about teaching you new neuroscience, new psychology, but it's about applying the knowledge that you already have, or that you can easily obtain by reading papers or doing literature research, to all sorts of societal issues. That's the goal of the master. This is done in a one-year program where there's several courses. There's 3 courses in the first semester. One of them is a course I give myself, which is Brain and Mind in Business and Society. Many of the things I talked about, you will be taught there. So it's about writing, it's about making YouTubes, it's about doing business pitches, it's about inventing business ideas, stuff like that. Applied experimental skills in brain recognition, that's, about experimental skills. And then there's another, which is, by the way, taught by these 2 guys, Jaap Meurer and Richard Rudinghoff. And this is me, by the way. And real-world cases in brain recognition is taught by Ilya Slichter. He will, present you with the real-world cases. That's companies really wanting a case being solved. And then, your assignment is to do that in a group setting. So, and then there's internships and thesis, which is, of course, a very important component of this master. Internships, typically, you do in a business, in a company, not with us. Thesis, preferentially also in a business or a company, but can also be with us. Of course, and in both instances, you will have supervision and guidance by one of us. But the idea is that you go into society. That's the idea. So these are just a few examples of these internships and master theses of a few of the companies we have sort of regular contact with, and who are happy to accommodate you in your internship or even your thesis. But of course, it's also perfectly fine and even preferable to find your own companies, because one of the ideas, one of the goals of the master, is to let businesses know what the use of psychology and neuroscience may be for their business. And because lots of businesses don't really know that yet. But as soon as they find out, for example, the companies I showed you here, as soon as they find out, they're pleasantly surprised, and often people are given jobs right on the spot, more or less. All right. Some examples of jobs being held by people here. Well, all sorts of different. It's consultancy. It's developer. It's doing research. It's doing HR. All sorts of different kinds of things you can imagine where you can be of use to a company, because you know a lot of human behavior, basically. So finally, I want to show you a short movie where this is all sort of summed up. So let's have a look at that one. What happens in society is, of course, in the end, all caused by human behavior. Whether it's about, the way we behave towards one another, or how businesses are trying to sell you their products, or how politicians or NGOs are trying to get your attention. It's all about what happens in our mind, in our brains. And that is why psychology and neuroscience are actually vital to understanding what's happening in society, but also key to find ways to influence the way we think, the way we decide, and the way we act.
I did the Bachelor of Psychobiology, and in this master I really wanted to use the knowledge that I already had in the application in society and in businesses, as opposed to going into research. So what I really like is that it's very much applications-based and oriented. So instead of taking a lot of exams, it's very much about creating things for real-world clients and then presenting them to them, which I think is really great.
been great working with some of the staff members in the course because a lot of them have their own companies, we are really out in the field and know exactly what's going on. So that's been really useful for being able to find an internship and get some applied experience outside of the university.
What really sets our program apart is the broad range of internships that are possible. Our students have obtained internships in large multinationals, such as Heineken, Philips or IKEA, but also in small startups, or with the government, or in non-governmental non-profit organizations.
In the first two courses, you're basically trained to translate brain and cognition knowledge into societal answers, and you're trained in experimental skills and online programming. And finally, in this course, you're really trained to become a business consultant. You will work on 2 business cases for a month each, with 3 students in total. Each business case will be introduced by one of our business partners.
Currently for the class real-world case studies, we are making a product for the company Neurotechnology. We're making a product that will help target the demographic of Generation Z. This is the product that we've made for it so far, and we're going to be presenting it to the officials from the company this afternoon.
The nice thing of our close collaboration with these non-academic partners is that our students are immediately immersed in the most recent societal developments, like, for example, climate change. One of the other nice things about this collaboration with these companies and organizations is that these organizations immediately see the relevance of the knowledge that these students bring and often offer them jobs right on the spot.
After I finished this program, I was thinking I might look into consulting, specifically consulting in the human capital sector, and especially working with companies to improve the performance and the culture of their organization by changing how people interact with it.
The great part about this master is that there's a million different directions you can go in afterwards. Personally, I'm going to be doing my internship with a neuromarketing company, so that's probably the direction I'll end up going in.
All right. So that's what I wanted to tell you about the master, its content and what we will teach you, and then we will now move to the other speaker, Manon Slokkers, to tell you, details about how to apply, when to apply, and who can apply. Good luck.